Hello and welcome to another After Maths episode of the Primary Maths Podcast, the show where we talk all things primary maths, with me, John Cripwell.
And with me, Becky Brown.
Hello, Becky. How are you this week?
Hello, I'm very well, thank you. We had a birthday in our house this week, so I now have two teenagers living under the roof, two teenage boys living under our roof. So I'm sure we have some interesting times to come, but it's been a great week full of cake and celebrations. Thank you. How has your week been, John?
Yeah, this week's been, well, it seems to be flying by actually this week, if I'm honest. It's been a busy one, kind of in and out of lots of different projects and things, keeping me on my toes. I was lucky enough to go to a conference last Friday over at the Leicester City Stadium, the King Power Stadium in Leicester. I've never been there before, actually. As a Derby County fan, it was interesting because the two stadiums are very similar. Pride Park in Derby and Leicester, the King Power Stadium, very similar sort of in design, but obviously different colour schemes and things because of the. And we did some maths as well while I was there too. It wasn't just about the football, but yeah. So it's been a good week, and you know we can talk a little bit about the conference in a moment because some interesting things came out of it. What else are we talking about today, Becky?
So I've got a little bit of maths of life today to share. There's been a lot going on in the world of maths this week. I feel like we've had Key Stage 2 SATs week. We've had International Women in Mathematics Day. There's a lot going on at the moment, which is great, isn't it? People talking about maths can only be a good thing. So there's a bit of that as well.
Yes. Yeah. Generally, people talking about maths is a good thing. Although the Key Stage 2 tests, it's an interesting one, isn't it? So, yes, we know they've been going on this week because neither of us are in school, and obviously all those papers are locked away under lock and key and things. Neither of us have seen the papers yet, but I've been talking to a few teachers. Clearly, we won't discuss any of the content of the papers here, and obviously the teachers haven't discussed the content of the papers with me either in any detail. But it seems by and large that the consensus is that the arithmetic paper was pretty fair actually this year.
Yep.
And as we're recording this, most children will have just finished the third paper, the second reasoning paper, this morning. And the first reasoning paper, there seems to be a bit of a mixed reception to it. I was looking online last night at some of the reaction to it and things. So I think everybody agreed that the arithmetic paper was fair. I think, interestingly, one or two people have said to me that it started off, ordinarily the first question or two are pretty much gimme sort of questions, aren't they? Something like 1,000 take away 999 or something like that.
Yeah.
I think there was a little bit of a feeling that the first couple of questions this time were slightly trickier, but nothing untoward, nothing that people wouldn't be expecting. But the reasoning paper, it seemed that either you thought it was fair, challenging in places, or people thought it was a really horrible paper. So I'm looking forward to. Looking forward is the wrong word. I know these things. It's so difficult, isn't it? Because as we've said in the past, the Key Stage 2 results are important for the school, but they're not really important for the child unless we put undue pressure on them and make them seem like they're really important, and then they can have a huge impact actually on that child. And it's a really difficult balancing act, I think, for school leaders and for teachers who don't want children to feel under pressure, because these SATs results it's not like a GCSE result that is going to dictate what you do next in life, is it?
No.
Whether you have a good SATs mark or not a great SATs mark, you're still going into year 7 and you'll be doing maths at secondary school, and you'll be working your way eventually towards a GCSE. It doesn't really make any difference. It's not going to change your options. But it does matter for the school. So I can understand, is what I'm trying to say, why some schools perhaps spend a bit more time preparing for the SATs than some other schools do. But ultimately, if we've got children, a couple of teachers online were saying that they had children crying at the papers yesterday because they found the reasoning one so hard. And I find that really difficult because that doesn't feel like a low stakes kind of test to me. That makes it feel like it's become something for that child. And I'm not saying it's the teacher's fault. We don't know the context there, but it feels like that has become a bigger thing for the child than it really is, if you know what I mean.
It's very sad, isn't it? And it's also just not the message that you want them to go up to secondary school. You don't that's not what you want them to take with them, is it?
No.
About maths, their last memory being something that reduced them to tears or was stressful in
No.
some way. Like you say, contexts are different. That balance is so hard having taught in year 6. I know you've got lots of experience as well. That the balance between making it important enough that it will do its job in
Yep. Yep.
supporting the school, but also reassuring the children is difficult, is tricky. So yeah, well done. Anybody that's listening now will of course have finished with their SATs week for the year and hopefully have lots of exciting things ahead. So
Yeah,
well done.
absolutely. Yeah, but yeah. So by the time you're listening, it's all done and dusted now, isn't it? Really, unless you've got any. Well, no, it's just done and dusted, really. So congratulations on making it through another SATs week. Be interested to hear what you thought about the papers. Uh, were they fair? Were they challenging? What did you make of them? Will it change anything that you do for next year in terms of teaching? Have you realised that actually, we didn't cover this, or there was more shape, space and measure on there than we thought there would be? Does it have any implications for you in your teaching, or does it just feel like another hoop that you've jumped through, and now it's on to summer productions or uh, yeah, some schools I've noticed, Becky, are having sort of the last 2 weeks of the year now where all the children move up to their new classes. A school locally to me does that, which, yeah, you've not actually got that much longer with the year sixes in
No.
that case then before they go and become year six plus or whatever you want to call them, and they're doing other things,
Yeah,
either with
it goes
sports
very
coaches or whatever. Yeah. Yeah,
yeah,
the year is drawing towards a close already, it feels like.
yeah. And of course, we've just got one set of tests, and still have, or we don't call it a test, do we? We
It's
still
not
have
a test, Becky.
the
What
multiplication
it
check.
may look like a test, sound like a test, appear to be a test. You get a score at the end of it, but what it
Check.
definitely is not is a test,
Yeah,
just so we're clear. By the
yeah.
way, you are talking about.
The multiplication tables check, of course. Year 4 teachers will be still sort of contemplating that. I think, is it 2 weeks' time, 3 weeks' time? We're still a
Yeah,
little
so the window opens at the start of June, doesn't it? So we've got about 2 or 3 weeks for that, and too late, I would suggest, to be, you know, starting to learn the times tables now if you haven't already. But there is still time to plug any little gaps that you might have. If you're using the Twinkle Maths app, you can see, exactly where those gaps might be. And perhaps a little bit of time spent just practicing those particular ones, teaching those particular ones. Might be time well spent at this point. The official sort of multiplication tables check um, testing. It's not a test. Testing portal is open so that you can log in and actually see what the actual check will look like now and have a go on that actual check. Get the children to have a go at logging in for themselves and things. So that's open now. So that's a fun thing that you could be doing in school at the moment, as we move towards that. But yes, I mean, to be fair, it was really interesting. I was looking at the data around the MTC, the multiplication tables check, and we know that year on year, the average number of questions answered correctly has increased since its inception
Yeah.
a few years ago. It's gone up. What hasn't increased, and we might have talked about this on a podcast already, so we won't labour the point, but what hasn't seemed to have increased in line with that is the Key Stage 2 year six outcomes when it comes to multiplication and division. Particularly looking at the arithmetic check and things, the arithmetic test and things, that hasn't gone up. Now, it could just be a lag because,
Yeah.
the multiplications
Possibly.
check came in and those children are in year 4 and they're coming through to year 6. So I think the next couple of years will be interesting. But I think there really is a question about whether the MTC is checking well, we know it's only checking rote memorization of the facts. It'd be really interesting to see whether that has as much bearing on the sort of understanding of how to use them as it does on just being able to recall the facts.
Yeah, because well, we know, don't we, how important that conceptual understanding of times tables is, and how important it is to be able to apply those when you go to more complex algorithms. But that alone isn't quite enough, is it? And I think there could be. Yeah, it will be interesting to look at the data and see what the
Yeah.
discrepancy is. And
Yeah, it's
cons-
interesting. It's like that thing, isn't it, where you can do division, but if you can't interpret what the remainders mean, then it doesn't necessarily help you. Um, you know, so yeah, it's an interesting thing to look at, and something that we'll keep an eye out on over the next couple of years, and keep you informed about. Um, so I mentioned on Friday, Becky, I had the pleasure to go along. I wasn't speaking or anything. I was just there as an attendee,
oh,
somebody who could eat the pastries, drink the coffee, sit back, listen to some really really interesting discussions around early maths in particular. Now, as you mentioned earlier, I spent most of my teaching career in year six, and regular listeners to the podcast will know early years was not my forte at all for most of my career. But and maybe this is one thing that I can give Ofsted a tiny bit of credit for. About 5 or 6 years ago, people started saying, when Ofsted come in, they are going to ask you as subject leader for maths, what does maths look like all the way from nursery through to year six? What is that journey like? And I thought at the time, I don't know. I really need to get a little bit more involved. So I did. And actually, it turned out I really loved going and spending a bit of time in early years. And I find early years maths particularly fascinating.
yeah,
That very early, interaction with these concepts. And I really love the the foundation stage, the reception foundation stage curriculum, in so much as it recognizes that maths is all around us and there are loads of opportunities to interact with maths in the environment, in a good early years environment. There's loads of, whether you're in the sandpit or the water tray or outside playing with acorns, whatever it is, there's maths everywhere. But the real focus in terms of that development of number is just on numbers to 10, 0 to 10. And I really love that because it gives loads and loads of time and opportunity to really get into to understanding our base 10 number system, which is obviously, Becky, the sort of foundations for everything that we do in maths when it comes to number, isn't it?
yeah, and we know, don't we, that we don't often, or it doesn't feel like we have enough time to give really key concepts. So the importance of having that time early on is so important, isn't it? I mean, I don't have any experience of early years maths at all, John. I was maths lead in two key stage two schools, but obviously have had my own children. And also it is fascinating that the links that are made and the things that are happening just by doing the things that you do with young children
Yes.
and
Yeah.
drawing
Well,
the maths from it.
yeah. Well, that was one of the keynote for the conference was given by Dr. Charis Vutsina, who is going to be joining us actually on the podcast in June. That episode will probably go out in July, actually. She travelled up to Leicester from Southampton, actually, Becky. She works at the University of Southampton. And her keynote was all about maths at home and working in partnership with parents, really. And the sort of project that she told us about was one that involved children in England, actually around the Southampton kind of area, particularly. That's where they'd reached out to, and Jamaica. And I did ask her, was that because she wanted to visit Jamaica? But unfortunately, she didn't get to go. She just happened to know somebody out there who was able to do the research with them. And it was all about making sense of numerals in the world around us that don't relate to quantity. So could young children, spot numbers in the world around them that didn't relate to a quantity? So immediately you might think about things like house numbers or numbers on buses, but it could even be ordinality rather than cardinality, first, second, third, and that sort of thing. And spotting opportunities to see those numbers, understand the context of them, and talk about them with the family that they happen to be with. And the way they did the project, they encouraged parents to take a photo of the number that they'd found and then describe the conversation that they'd had with the child and upload it to a Padlet. And they shared some of the outcomes with us, actually. Some of the ones that they'd spotted were things like speed limits, road signs. So, and again, these are EYFS children. So a 40-mile-an-hour road sign, that's not within the numbers to 10 that we talk about, but the child had spotted the number 4, and the parent had talked to them about, well, the zeros next to it, so that means that it's 40. And even though that might not be the way that we would teach how to understand the number 40, I think it's still worthwhile having that conversation, isn't it? And saying, yeah, you're right, that is a 4, but actually because it's got another digit next to it, that means something else. There was somebody who'd spotted a train sign at a station that said that the 1815 Liverpool Lime Street train was coming. It got 11 carriages. It was platform 3. It was the third one, and it was coming and the time was 18:15:33. And the child had spotted that there was lots of 3s on there, and all of them sort of meant something slightly differently. So they were talking about those things. I thought that was really interesting. Another one was putting together not putting together. They were hiring a bike, and there was a price list, and they saw that the bike was described as being for 3-5-year-olds. And they were sort of talking about, well, what number is missing out of there? Why is there a dash? And the child understood that they could have it because they were 4, and that meant that children who were 3, 4, or 5 could ride it. So it's those kinds of conversations that might happen naturally, but giving parents and carers and family members kind of the invitation to talk about those things with the children and not dismiss them or think that that's something for school, really. So I'm sure you did loads of those sorts of things with your children, Becky.
Yeah, I loved it. I mean, it's easy, isn't it, when you're in education and it's important. But as you've mentioned already, I think it's important not to worry too much about the educational bit at all at that point. It's hard when you're a teacher, I know, but
Yeah.
sometimes actually, I'm not sure how to answer that question. As you said about the 40, at that point, it's about noticing and being curious and discussing it and being open to discuss it, isn't it? We shouldn't get too hung up, I don't think, on the exact terminology, for example, when we're not in the classroom. We can do
No,
that
not
later.
as a parent, not as a parent. And I think what could be more damaging actually is for a parent, and I don't mean intentionally damaging, but for a parent to say, oh, that's, ask your teacher about that. That's not something that I feel comfortable to. And I know why they say that, because there's a lot of thinking that, the way methodologies have changed and the way that we teach maths now might not be the same as the parents had at school, and therefore they don't want to get it wrong. They don't want to say the wrong thing, undermine any work that the teachers are doing. It comes from a really good place often. But I think hearing, oh, that's not something that I can talk to you about. That's a specialist thing for you teachers to talk about. When it comes to something as simple as what does a 0 mean when it's next to the 4, it is possibly, doing more harm than it is actually doing good, even though it comes from a good intention.
Yeah, I agree. It's important just having those discussions and being open to it. As a parent, we put a lot of pressure on ourselves, don't we? But being open to having those discussions and spotting those things. I remember going on walks and pointing out door numbers and things like that. That maths is everywhere. So children will see it and will probably ask questions about it.
That's how I learned I was short-sighted, Becky. Walking home from swimming at Centre Parks one night, trying to find our villa number, and walking with my dad and looking at the villa numbers, and I couldn't read some of them, and he could, and so it wasn't because I wasn't very good at maths at that point. It was just because I was a little short-sighted. So that was really interesting. It got me thinking, as a maths lead, how do I, this is a great project to get involved in. it's the sort of thing that you could do in school quite easily, really. Looking for maths in the environment, you could do it as a whole school project, couldn't you? You could do it as a
Yeah.
competition, but a way to generate conversations, positive conversations around maths at home amongst families. I just thought that was an interesting thing to do. And I've done something similar actually in the past. I'd had a competition to find shapes in the environment. That opened up a whole can of worms, of course,
Can
because if you
imagine
look
it.
at something like a road sign, often they appear to be triangular, but they're not actually triangular because the corners, as it were, are rounded, and those sorts of things. It opens up to, I would say numbers are a little safer to
Yes.
interact with in that situation. It's only when you send it out and then you go, oh no, yeah, what have I done here?
Prompting great discussion.
Yeah, prompting discussion. Exactly. Why is that not a triangle? The second session, very quickly, was led by Professor Camilla Gilmore, who has been very involved in lots of great work going on around maths at the moment, involved in the Maths Horizon project and things, and looking at what should come next for the curriculum. She talked about oracy, and particularly oracy in early years, which I think actually early years settings are probably very good at. So it was just looking at, again, those opportunities that aren't within a maths lesson, particularly if you have maths lessons in your early year setting. But we saw a video of some children using modelling clay and talking about which one was heavier and which one was lighter, and did it matter what the shape was and that sort of thing. Just a really rich opportunity for lots of discussion about those things, and the use of gesture to go along with that as well, to indicate which one was heavier and which one was lighter, and beginning to internalize that vocabulary and that concept of something being heavier and lighter. And then a really fascinating session with Dr. Marie Josie Bisson, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, who was talking to us about language and EAL children in particular, or children who were bilingual. For instance, in French, un doesn't sound that different to one, does it? If you know what I mean. You can sort of see and both those languages use Arabic numerals, so they translate very nicely. But she showed us some numerals written in Gujarati, and 1, 2, and 3, you could sort of see why they looked very similar. But I think it was number 4 looked very much like a number 8 in Arabic, and number 6 looks like a number 5, or again, don't quote me on that. I'm trying to recall this, but you can really see if I wasn't aware of that as a teacher, and you can't be aware of everything, can you? But if I wasn't aware of that as a teacher, I can really understand now why some children might find that confusing if they're seeing certain numerals at home and certain numerals at school, and they look very, very similar. So that was really interesting. Got me really thinking about the use of language. We love a bit of language on this podcast, don't we, Becky? Thinking about the etymology. And then after lunch, there was a panel discussion, which was interesting. And then a final session on using storybooks to bring maths to life. And I got to look. It wasn't that we've talked about this before, but in this case, it wasn't maths storybooks in particular. It was any storybook. Can you
Right.
find the maths in it? Can you see the opportunities to talk to children about maths? Whether you are looking at A Squash and a Squeeze, a Julia Donaldson book, or whether, I was given a brand new, Becky, never before opened, Lift the Flap Under the Sea book. And,
Oh,
all the flaps were still stuck down. I had to peel them
wow.
open. It was very satisfying for 10 minutes looking through that. But there was loads of maths in there when you looked at it, whether that was predicting which creature was going to be big or small or whatever. There was loads in there. So it was great. So thank you very, very much to the team at the Centre for Early Mathematics Learning at the University, Loughborough University. It was brilliant to work with them for the day, or to be inspired by them for the day. I had a great time. So thank you. And it's lovely if you can get out into these opportunities. It's very difficult, I think, to get out of school these days to go to these things. But if you see the opportunity, this one was free to attend. I know that's not free for school necessarily, because they'd have to cover you potentially. But if you get the opportunity, try and take them, because they're well worth going along to. I always leave learning something new.
Sounds great.
Also, just one final thing, learnt for the first time about bilingual nurseries. So these are, this is I think they've got 3 of them now in the Midlands, where I don't know if it's half, but some of the staff are Spanish and only speak Spanish at nursery, and the other staff are English and only speak English. So, children from 6 months old are absorbing both of these languages and becoming, having being immersed in both those languages, which I thought was a brilliant idea. I wish
Love that. And of
we'd
course,
have an opportunity like that.
in Wales, of course, often
Mm,
you have Welsh medium and English medium schools, but often they will do a bit of both. So
yes. Yeah.
there, I trained in Wales and had to teach Welsh, which was
Oh,
interesting.
really?
Yeah,
Ah,
I'm not
yeah.
Welsh,
Cymru.
obviously.
That's
But,
that's
yeah,
about the most of my Welsh, I'm afraid. I can say Wales in Welsh. That's about it. So, yeah. So, that was a great day on Friday, and, thoroughly enjoyed it. Made me think a lot about the early years and, the early interactions with maths.
sounds great.
Becky, over to you. You wanted to you've got a little bit of maths of life, I think.
Yes. Well, yeah, I think we'd call it a massive life. I was going to talk about how I saw a trundle wheel being used in real life for the first time ever this week.
That's
Because
exciting. Save
I
that. We need a
know.
whole episode on
Yeah,
that.
I'll save
That's
that.
not just a segment. That's a whole thing.
I know. I
Brilliant.
got to the rope old. Well, I got to a ripe old age before I saw the use of a trundle wheel in real life. Um, but it would be. I think it would be remiss for me not to acknowledge the fact that this week was the 8th annual celebration of women in mathematics. So that was on May the 12th. This episode is going on the 15th, but it prompted a little bit of personal research, I guess, into some mathematicians and female mathematicians. And I came across, and I've come across her before, of course, but the work of Maryam Mirzakhani, who was an Iranian mathematician. She died in 2017, and she was the first woman to be awarded a Fields Medal, which is considered to be the most prestigious award in mathematics. But the reason I sort of went with looking into her a bit more detail is that she used what she called doodling. She did a lot of her work on big sheets of paper on the floor. So drawing lots of complex geometric shapes and formulas to visualize and solve abstract problems. And her daughter described it as painting. Obviously, it wasn't quite painting, but I loved this. And I thought, actually, what a great lesson that was to share with children, that maths isn't sitting either at a computer or at a desk necessarily, but the importance of that doodling. And particularly this week, we've been talking about SATs and talking about the importance of jottings. As a year 6 teacher, that was something we talked about a lot. You get that show you're working. And it's not just to tick a box, is it? There's a lot of really good reasons behind doodling. We've got cognitive offload. We're taking the work away from our brain and putting it on some paper. So that's really important. We've talked about this before, but the brain can only hold 4 to 7 pieces of information. Interestingly, some of the more complex reasoning questions require you to remember at least 10. So that goes to show the importance of being able to jot something down. So it just felt great that actually this isn't just a thing that teachers will say, yes, you need to do this. It's important. People have done their life's work based on, doodling and jotting. And there is a project called the Mathamalchemy Project. And it's a room-sized art installation celebrating the beauty of maths. And one of the parts of it, one of the features, is called the Great Doodle page. And it's basically, it features the doodles of 7 celebrated female mathematicians. So Ada Lovelace is in there, Maya Mazzacani is in there, as mentioned previously. And it is a celebration of their doodling. And you can actually see, and there's a lovely website which you can look at it all on. I think it's in Switzerland at the moment, or maybe even further afield. So I don't think, unfortunately, John, I don't think we'll be going to see it, but it'd be a great field trip. But I just loved that the focus was on the doodling. And I felt like that would, if I was in the classroom, that would be a perfect opportunity to talk about doodling. And maybe, if you're a year 6 teacher, post SATs, doing something where you maybe set a problem and ask the children to only draw or visualize or illustrate a problem might be a really nice activity and actually really powerful, because to be able to do that, you need to have a bit of an understanding of what you're doing. So a bit
Absolutely.
joined up week of women in maths and SATs and doodling all came together this week, which was lovely. It was a nice little trip um, across the internet as always, but finding out a little bit more for me too.
That's fascinating. I'm going to have to have a look at that website and see some of those doodles. I think there's also something quite powerful about the link with spatial reasoning as well, actually, with the doodling and being able to visualize and take something, see something in your head and put it on the paper, or sometimes it just comes out on the paper first and then you can put it in your head. I was mentioning to you earlier, Becky, I was talking to some teachers yesterday about children who were young children, Key Stage 1 and early years, who were struggling to recall their number bonds. And I know that this school does some great work with tens frames. And the teacher said, yes, they can do it with the tens frame, but as soon as you take the tens frame away, they're less confident. And so I was thinking, well, okay, well that suggests to me that they're not internalizing that representation. It's very much still in the concrete form, which makes sense if that's how we're using it. You know, it becomes a tool, doesn't it? As we've said before, we need to be careful that these representations don't become a method. They don't become the tool that we have to rely on. So we were talking about ways that you could move beyond that. And I think one of the ways is you know, having it in front of you, but then suggesting to the children, right, can you close your eyes? Can you still see the tens frame now in front of you? Can you imagine taking one of the counters off it? You know, where's that space now? Which one have you taken away? Can you open your eyes and make that now on your tens frame? And doing some visualization around that sort of thing, which I think leads in really nicely eventually to this kind of doodling. You know, imagine what would happen if, and can I then begin to represent it in some way? It allows you to explore, doesn't it, in ways that you might not do otherwise, I suppose.
Yeah, and I think in maths we often, we are very hot on use of representations and using them correctly. Sometimes doing something that's not so structured can be really helpful as well. If you're using it as something to reduce cognitive load, or it's almost like a footprint of your thinking, isn't it? It's like a journey and something you can refer back to as well. Then, if you've got it
Yeah,
recorded in some way.
and it makes it it gives rise to that slight tension then sometimes, doesn't it, between wanting a maths book to be perfectly presented, and there is a time when it's very helpful to present things in an ordered, neat way. You know, that's why we have squares in maths books and things. But also they can become a barrier if you are drawing a representation that isn't squares, or, you know, if you want to do a number line that doesn't necessarily have the sort of um, demarcations that the squares are going to give you, the intervals that the squares are going to give you would be a better way of saying it, or a bar model that's in thirds maybe that doesn't, you know, now I've got to think of multiples of 3 to draw my squares and things. Sometimes just doodling it on a blank piece of paper is much easier and
Yeah.
less constrictive, or less constricting, and so yeah, it's weighing up where's the benefit here, isn't it? At certain times we want to work in a very neat way. In other times, we just want to explore and be imaginative and do those doodles and draw it out. I was working with somebody the other day on a bit of DIY, and we needed to work out what the aperture would be between two pieces of wood that were going to make a sort of frame. You know, I drew it, and I didn't use a ruler. And it didn't matter that they weren't all perfectly proportional, because that wasn't the point. I needed, as you suggested, Becky, to get some of those things out of my head, get them onto the paper, get some of the numbers against them to work it out, and then I could do it. If I tried to do all of that in my head, I wouldn't have been able to. And if I'd spent ages drawing it out perfectly neatly, it would have taken me 3 times as long. So we know one of the aims of the national curriculum is fluency, and part of fluency is efficiency. So, you know, what is the most efficient way? And sometimes I think it's getting rid of the ruler, getting rid of the squares at the right time, and you know, just doing a little bit of doodling. So, yeah, thank you to all those inspirational women in mathematics that have contributed, whether they know it or not, to that project on doodles, because it sounds really interesting.
Yeah, one of the best things I ever did in teaching was introduce whiteboard books. So if you give children whiteboards, they will often do what we've just said, do something fairly, they won't get a ruler, they'll just do it, what comes into their head. But of course, the issue is then that it gets erased. We
Yes.
introduced whiteboard books which were not marked. There was
Yep.
no presentation restrictions on it. But it also allowed children to go back and see what they'd done before,
Yes,
whether
such a
that
good
was
idea.
right or wrong, because there's a place for that as well, of course. So yeah, one of the best things we ever introduced in my recent school was
Yeah, we had similar with we called them maths jotters, but we had our journals that were for neat recording and had squares in them, and then jotters that teacher didn't really look at, to be honest, unless the child was in the lesson and needed some help with something. But it's as you say, it wasn't taken in or marked or anything like that. So yeah. We would love, as ever, to hear how you are using these sorts of things. If you've got a solution that other teachers might find useful, we would love to hear from it. Otherwise, Becky, I think that's us for this week. We will be back on Tuesday with a interview episode all about National Numeracy Day, which is coming up just next week. Actually, next Wednesday is National Numeracy Day. So yeah, looking forward to that one. In the meantime, as ever, Becky, we would love it, wouldn't we, if people would give us a follow, a like, a subscribe, even a little review. And if they want to get in touch with us, Becky?
Through maths. Oh, I don't know.
We've only said it 70 odd times on the podcast. I mean, yeah, it can't be. I can't remember what episode number this is exactly, but it's definitely in the 70s.
It is.
It's a tricky one to remember, though, to be fair. Primary Maths Podcast at twinkle.co.uk. If you would like to get in touch or find us on any of the socials, really.
Please do. We'd love to hear from you.
I'm leaving that in, by the way, Becky. Just
good.
It deserves to be heard.
That's because I've not known from a script, John. I should have had it written
because you've
down.
not written it down. You couldn't hold that many things in your head at any one time. You needed to doodle it on a piece of paper, and you'd have been fine.
You normally do that bit. That's the issue.
I do.
You normally do that bit.
Yeah, I threw you under the bus there yet again. Yeah, that's what I do best. I apologise.
No, it's fine.
Anyway, we hope you have a lovely week. If you're in year 6, congratulations. SATs are over for another year. If you're in year 4, it's not a test. It'll be fine. And everybody else, we hope you have a lovely weekend, and we'll see you on Tuesday.
See you next time.
Take care. Bye.